Hi. All right. I did the debrief on outsourced film comparing the different language and jargon used between the different cultures. So some of the American jargon that he has to explain is kitsch. He says kitsch, schmuck, and redneck all in one statement. And Paru, the guy that he's training, didn't know what any of them meant, so he had to explain those. And then later on, he says tacky, and um, they don't use that in India. And then the other one was small talk. One of the employees in the team meeting, when Todd brought up small talk, didn't know what that was. So those are the ones that are American that had to be explained to the Indians. And then Indian jargon that had to be explained was Holi. Todd had never heard of that and never heard of that celebration. So when Peru was like, "Oh, it's Holi," he didn't know what that meant. And then rubber was another one. One of the employees on a call was trying to sell someone a rubber, and he was meaning a racer, but in America that was taken as condom. So big misunderstanding. And then cricket was one that came up. They just specified that that's very similar to like American baseball. And then arranged marriage or any talk of marriage was just really different. Like when they bring up being engaged or marriage, it was very different from what that means in American culture. So that had to be explained, and the verbiage of that had to be explained. And then condom, flat, and apartment, that kind of came up as one that's different for everyone. When they were talking about the rubber, and Todd said, "Oh, it's a condom in America." They said, "Oh, like a flat." And then somebody else was like, "Oh, no, that's an apartment." So I think just the different words for that. Flat was the Indian term, and then apartment was the one that they said was American. So they just had to explain those. There can be a lot of difficulties with different languages in business correspondence. Um, there's potential misrepresentations for different cultures. Like we saw with rubber, the intent of something being said can be very different depending on your culture and the slang and jargon you use. Similar with gestures, you have to be careful with. And then difficulty translating. You might not understand um, the slang or jargon someone else is using, or if it's in a completely different language being translated, key points of what they're saying might not go from the Indian to American translation of it. Um, and then there can be some difficulty getting a message across in the correct tone. When you're having to translate and continually change it, I think the tone gets lost and you can't see those initial emotions that present with it and the pitch of voice and volume, all that. And then if you have any prejudice or stereotyping, that can lead to unfair judgments that could interfere with business. So if any of the Americans had previous prejudices or stereotyping towards the Indians, that might be unfair judgment. And then similarly, if they had any towards the Americans, that could lead to an unfair judgment that could get in the way of business. Um, Strategies that Todd used to deal with this was he asked clarifying questions when he was unsure of the language or the messages being used, which similarly, the employees also did that for him, but that just gave a lot more clarity on like how they can communicate in the office and understanding each other's word usage. And then he also immersed himself in the Indian culture to have a better understanding of their perspective. And that helped a lot once he started giving into the experiences outside of the office of experiencing Indian culture and life and the food and the celebrations. He got a much better idea of the employees as people. And then finally, he allowed them to bring in their personal items and do business in a way that would make them more successful. And that taught him a lot about the differences between an Indian workspace and an American workspace and how those can be different for how it's successful. And I think he learned a lot from what gave them success in their selling. And Asha, for example, he promoted because of her ability to do this. And he learned a lot from how she was able to sell so successfully. So, yeah.